Once upon a time, there was a poor couple living in a small village. After many years of longing, the wife finally gave birth to a lovely baby boy. However, something strange happened. When the boy was born, his head was still covered by the amniotic sac, making people believe it was a miraculous sign. The elders in the village prophesied, saying, "This boy will marry the princess when he turns 16 years old." This prophecy quickly spread and caught the attention of the king. When the king heard this story, he became very angry. With his cruel and proud nature, he could not accept the idea that a poor child could have such a glorious fate. The king ordered that the boy be captured and dealt with immediately. But the king pretended to be kind and visited the boy's family. He said, "You are poor. Let me raise this child. I will take good care of him." The boy's parents, wanting their son to have a better life, agreed. However, instead of taking the boy to the palace, the king ordered his soldiers to throw the boy into a box and cast it into the river, hoping the box would sink and the boy would never be seen again. But a miracle happened. The box did not sink, but kept floating along the river, until it got stuck at a mill in a faraway village. A poor couple who had no children discovered the box. They opened it and found a healthy, handsome boy inside. Although surprised, they were very happy, thinking it was a gift from heaven. They decided to raise the boy and named him Sin. 16 years later, Sin grew up to be a strong, handsome young man. One day, while working at the mill, a heavy rain forced the king and his retinue to stop and rest there. Seeing Sin, the king was amazed by his good looks. The king asked a poor couple, "Is this boy your son?" A poor couple replied, "No, your majesty. This is the boy we found in a box that drifted from the river 16 years ago." When the king heard this, he remembered the boy he had ordered to be thrown into the river. Although very angry, the king still pretended to be kind and said, "I will give you a lot of gold and silver. But if this boy wants to stay with you, he must deliver a letter to the queen." The king gave Sin a letter with the following message. When the queen receives this letter, she must kill Sin and bury his body. Sin set off on his journey, passing many fields and forests. But unfortunately, he got lost and entered a strange house that night. The house owner was an old woman. She saw Sin was tired and asked, "Where did you come from? Why did you get lost in my house?" Sin explained that he was on his way to the palace to deliver the letter to the queen, but he got lost in the forest. The old woman, feeling sorry for him, said, "Be careful. You've entered the house of a thief. If they return, you will be in danger." That night, the thieves returned and found a stranger in the house. They became angry and tried to kill Sin, but the old woman intervened. She said, "This boy was sent by the king to deliver the letter to the queen. He is so pitiful. I have let him stay the night." The thieves opened the king's letter and read the order to kill the messenger. They felt that it was unfair, so they decided to help Sin. The thieves tore up the king's letter and wrote a new one, which said, "When this boy delivers the letter to the queen, she must immediately arrange a wedding between the princess and Sin before the king returns." The next morning, the thieves gave Sin the new letter and pointed him in the right direction. Sin arrived at the palace and gave the letter to the queen. The queen, not suspecting anything, followed the instructions in the letter and organized a grand wedding for Sin and the princess. The wedding was full of joy and happiness, but when the king returned and heard about it, he was furious. The king summoned the queen and Sin and scolded them. The queen handed the king the new letter, and the king immediately noticed the change. He called Sin and asked, "Why is this letter different? Where is my original letter?" Sin replied, "I don't know, your majesty. Maybe the letter was swapped while I was sleeping at the old woman's house." The king was very angry but couldn't do anything. However, he was not ready to give up on testing Sin. He ordered, "If you want to marry the princess, you must go to the house and bring back 3 golden hairs from the monster. If you succeed, I will allow you to marry the princess." Sin, not afraid of the challenge, decided to embark on the seemingly impossible mission of retrieving 3 golden hairs from the monster in the hell. First city, the Dry Well. When Sin arrived in a city, the guards told him that the city used to have a miraculous well. This well didn't just provide water, but also flowed with delicious wine. However, recently the well had dried up and there was no water or wine anymore. The guards asked Sin, "You're a well-traveled man. Can you tell us why the well is dry?" Sin thought for a moment and replied, "I can't answer that right now, but I will tell you the reason when I return." He continued his journey, promising to find the answer. Second city, the Bare Apple Tree. After leaving the first city, Sin arrived at another city. In this city, there was a special apple tree. It used to bear bright red apples, but now the tree had withered, lost all its leaves, and no longer bore fruit. The people in the city were worried and asked Sin, "You're experienced. Can you help us understand why the apple tree is like this?" Sin replied, "I can't answer right now, but when I return, I will tell you the reason." He continued on his journey, keeping his promise. When Sin came to a large river, he met an old boatman. The boatman complained, "Why do I always have to row the boat? No one ever comes to replace me." Sin looked at him and replied, "I don't know the answer yet, but when I return, I will solve your problem." With that promise, Sin continued into the forest to find the entrance to the hell. Finally, Sin arrived at the gate of the hell. The gate was dark and smoky. The monster wasn't home, but there was an old woman sitting by the fire. The old woman saw Sin and asked, "What are you doing here? This place is not for humans." Sin replied, "I need to get 3 golden hairs from the monster and find the answers to 3 difficult questions. If I don't, I will lose my wife." The old woman sighed, "Your request is bold. If the monster knows you are here, it will kill you immediately. But I see that you're kind, so I'll help you." She cast a spell, turning Sin into a tiny ant and said, "Hide in my skirt. When the monster comes back, listen to its answers. I will carefully pluck 3 golden hairs for you." Sin thanked her and did as she said. When evening came, the monster returned home. It was large, fierce, with glowing red eyes and a voice like thunder. As soon as it entered, it sniffed the air and said, "Strange, I smell human flesh. Is someone here?" The old woman pretended to be angry. "You're always suspicious. I just cleaned the house, there's no one here. Sit down and have dinner." The monster mumbled and sat down to eat. After dinner, it felt tired and lay down, asking the old woman, "Pluck my lice for me." While doing this, the old woman gently plucked the first golden hair. The monster jumped up and yelled, "Ouch, what are you doing?" The old woman calmly replied, "I had a strange dream. Would you like to hear about it?" The monster, curious, asked, "What did you dream about?" The old woman told it, "I dreamt of a well that once flowed with wine, but now it's dry. Why is that?" The monster replied, "There's a large toad at the bottom of the well. Kill it and the wine will flow again." The old woman nodded, continuing to pluck lice. When the monster fell asleep, she plucked the second golden hair. The monster again woke up, shouting, "What are you doing?" The old woman pretended again. "I had another dream. I saw an apple tree that used to bear golden apples but is now bare. Why is this?" The monster replied, "There's a rat gnawing the roots. Kill it and the tree will bear fruit again." The monster angrily said, "If you hurt me again, I'll slap you." The old woman nodded and continued. Later, when the monster was asleep, she plucked the third golden hair. The monster woke up in pain, slapping the old woman. She quickly replied, "I had one last dream. I saw a boatman who must row forever without anyone replacing him. Why is that?" The monster lazily answered, "Just give the oars to someone else and the boatman will be free." When Sin returned, he answered all the questions. The dry well in the first city, Sin told them to kill the toad at the bottom of the well for the wine to flow again. The people gave Sin 2 donkeys loaded with gold. The bare apple tree in the second city, Sin said to kill the rat, gnawing the roots for the tree to bear golden apples again. The people gave Sin 2 more donkeys loaded with gold. When Sin told the boatman to give the oars to someone else and he would be free. When Sin returned to the palace with 4 donkeys full of gold and 3 golden hairs, the king was astonished and greedily asked, "Where did you get all this gold?" Sin replied, "Across the river where sand turns to gold." The king heard this and rushed to cross the river. But when he reached the other side, the boatman handed over the oars to the king and left, leaving the king to row the boat forever. Meanwhile, Sin married the princess and lived happily ever after. Thanks for joining us on this exciting journey. Here you'll enjoy the world's best stories and improve your English along the way. If that sounds fun, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss a single story. Let's make learning English easy and entertaining, one amazing tale at a time. See you in the next video for another adventure.